I hear this a lot, that people feel like their lives are so cluttered. And even simplifying the spaces in which we live and the spaces in which is our home and our offices, just to simplify even our spaces, that there's so much clutter and there's so much busyness and there's so much fog. To simplify life, I think we all are longing for a more simpler life. And the way to achieve a more simple life is to make simple choices. Hello, everyone, and welcome to 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and yet strategic choices that all of us can make in order to become the very best version of ourselves. My name is Dr. Michael Brown. I am the host of 3 Words, and I'm here today with a very good friend of mine, a very familiar face or voice, if you listen to our podcast here on 3 Words, none other than soon-to-be Dr. Russell Catania. And Russell, if you're watching on YouTube, you would have picked up on this, but our 3 words today are...
Keep it simple.
And the reason I say, or if you're watching today, is he's wearing a white t-shirt.
That's right.
He came to the studio with a white t-shirt, so I've put on a navy blue t-shirt to keep it simple for those of you who are watching.
Just slow it down a little bit.
But I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today on these 3 words, but I don't think I'm as excited as you are, because you said to me, I think this might be my favorite episode.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, Coach, I do feel like I say this every time we talk, because every time I think it gets a little more fun to have these conversations with you. But, simplicity is such an important concept as I've kind of matured outside of like high school and my undergrad years a little bit. I've really found that simplicity is that door you have to walk through in order to have more time, energy, and contentment in your life. And so I'm just really excited to share kind of the thoughts that I've been thinking about.
Well, I tend to think that we tend to overcomplicate as human beings the uncomplicated.
Oh, yeah.
That we tend to make things more intense and more complex than they need to be. And I think there's this longing, even within our culture, within our world, like for simplicity, like you said. And
of course,
now you're using this phrase, which I've never heard before, but it's fascinating. Tell me more about it. That simplicity is the door.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause
let me hear more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really do act in a way that is very congruent with what you had just said. We love to take situations and just kind of inflate them and romanticize them or just kind of build them up to be this hyped up, intense situation. And I think a lot of the times it can be because the choice might be simple, but the end result isn't exactly what we were looking for, or it's like an uncomfortable decision to make. And so I kind of often think of the example in this situation, like a breakup, needs to happen, but you don't want to go through with the process. And so the result is we make that situation complex. Like, oh, maybe in time that person will change, or maybe this is just a bad season of their life, or maybe I'm not filling that void that they have or something like that. Yeah. And so simple situation, right? Bad relationship. I need to exit, but we complicate the situation because the end result is uncomfortable, or the actual decision or the choice we have to make generates some discomfort. So complexity generates discomfort of their own. So we might like to just wallow in that complexity instead of make that choice, right? And choices we talk about very often on this podcast as being something that needs to happen, but there are a lot of barriers to making the right choice. And that's what maturity is all about. That's what growing is all about. And that's why we have this podcast.
And we talk a lot about becoming the best version of ourselves. And oftentimes people think, I want that. It's got to be a complicated process, right? There's got to be multiple layers. There's got to be all these different things I need to do. I need to think about things differently. I need to read this, and sometimes it's just a simple decision. So for instance, even with time, there's 168 hours a week. And so I need to spend more time doing this and less time doing this. It's math. Or I'm needing to achieve these financial goals. Well, I probably should spend less than I earn. It's really simple, but we make it so complex. And even as a life coach and as a consultant, I'm thinking even now my mind's racing with all these various situations that people will come to me with, or want to engage in a conversation with me with. And it seems to them I have this really complex problem, and I'm listening and I'm thinking, well, there's a simple choice that can be made that would solve it all.
Sure.
And even in my own life, it's hard when I look in the mirror and I think about a complex situation or a situation I find myself in, even personally or professionally. I tend to, like you said, overcomplicate it. But when someone outside looks in, they just kind of go, this seems simple to me.
Right.
The example you used, exit the relationship.
Yeah. Totally.
But I can't, it's big, it's more complicated. Well, no, not really. We can make it more complicated, but it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. And we often do. And you know, that complexity causes some stress and anxious feeling. And oftentimes, honestly, making the right choice can sometimes cause a little bit of that anxious feeling and that tension. But, you know, tomorrow has enough worry of its own. And so I often find that just trying to simplify things and make the right choice today and just making things practical and bite-sized and tangible often in the long run, even though, you know, taking that big leap all at once and often, right? Because simple often means less steps. And so less steps often means doing more at one time, right? So, you know, sometimes people try to, you know, exit that relationship over the course of a month by slowly decreasing conversation and then kind of seeming distant. And before you know it, it's been this like long drawn out process of a ton of emotions have been stirred up instead of just saying, this isn't what I need anymore. The time has been appreciated and I've grown through this process, but this relationship is no longer what I desire. Right. And that is all of the emotion in one sentence. And so that's a lot to take, right? So simplicity often comes with a more compact and filled event or choice. But if you get it all done at once, right, that's just a check off the box, right? If you sit down and take the 3 hours every month to look at that budget, instead of every week scrambling and looking through your credit card report and just do it all at once. It really simplifies the task, right? You're not scattered and disorganized, which often complicates things in and of itself, right? You're sitting down and you're checking off the box. And really at the end of the day, that does simplify things a ton.
Well, and I think even our lives, I hear this a lot, that people feel like their lives are so cluttered. And even simplifying the spaces in which we live and the spaces in which is our home and our offices, just to simplify even our spaces, that there's so much clutter and there's so much busyness and there's so much fog. To simplify life, I think we all are longing for a more simpler life. And the way to achieve a more simple life is to make simple choices and to really, like you said, bite size, one choice at a time, one decision at a time.
Right.
You had some other thoughts you were sharing even off camera that seemed really fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, and it kind of perfectly segues into what you were a little bit just saying right there. Simplicity is the desire. And I think all of us can agree, especially maybe in the last 24 months, that situations are just going to appear complex and complex situations and circumstances are just going to be there, period. So perhaps it's not reasonable to say, I want a life where only simple things happen to me. But I think it's worth encouraging the people that listen to this podcast and the people we love and know outside that every complex circumstance or situation is at the end of the day a series of simple scenarios that are just piled on top of each other. And no circumstance, no situation that we have to deal with in our life is so insurmountable that it cannot be broken down into easy, bite-sized, obtainable elements that we can deal with one at a time in order to achieve that goal or resolve that circumstance and change where we are now for growth.
I love this. In fact, it's interesting. I feel this, even as you share that, Russell, I feel this I feel lighter because I feel it for me, but I also feel it for our listeners and our viewers. I feel a little bit lighter, like, wow, every complex situation. And for many of us, we're dealing with such complex, even in our culture right now, there's such complexity and there's so many really intense issues with social justice, with the pandemic, the way that it's affecting the way we view work and health and to simplify that, to break it up, to keep it simple. it feels freeing. It feels lighter. It feels doable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
versus impossible.
Right. And it's what we do here. Our goal, and one of our goals with this podcast, is to be able to ultimately, at the end of the day, allow people to feel more alive and become the best version of themselves. And that's an ongoing process. But how do you just become the best version of yourself? That could possibly be one of the most complex things in and of itself. So what do we do in this podcast? We take small, bite-sized, obtainable elements.
I said that. That's right.
We put them into 3 words and we talk about it in 12 minutes. And it's just one practical way that even you and I, without have even maybe realized this specific way of phrasing the situation, have been doing that all along.
I think I even said that at the beginning of our podcast. I introduced it, I think, most likely, I don't recall exactly, but oftentimes simple and strategic choices.
Yeah,
Significant choices, simple choices, strategic, because it feels like it's doable. And I think that's what individuals want, to feel like I can actually do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And keeping it simple is really a practical thing to do. It sometimes just boils down to having a planner or journaling when thoughts get cluttered in your mind. I know for my wife and I, it really boils down to being transparent and communicative in our relationship when things seem like complex and tension it might be building up in our home. It really just boils down to the fact that we probably weren't communicating enough. And simplicity is found simply, and simplicity is achieved by making very small, simple changes in your day-to-day life, right? Writing down what you have to do in a week. And you often have encouraged me to sit down on my Sunday and make it a day of looking ahead, And so if I'm planning Tuesday, on Tuesday at 9 a.m., my day is not going to be simple at all.
It's going to be complicated. It's going to be complex. And we're going to wonder, we're going to roll our eyes and think to ourselves, this circumstance of my really complex Tuesday, which we chose that, right?
Right.
Because on Sunday, if we were to do the planning, we could actually keep Tuesday simple. Yeah. I think about math, and I keep coming back to this 168 hours a week. I have this much time and I want to keep life simple, but I'm horrible at math. You, brilliant friend, are probably very, very good at math, obviously on your way in med school and on your way to becoming a doctor. But addition and subtraction is easy.
Oh, yeah.
When you start getting into all these other things, algebra, trigonometry, I'm clueless. But simple math, plus or minus, if I want to achieve this particular health and physical dimension, I'm going to set my calorie limit here,
right?
Or I'm going to set my sleep this many hours, this many minutes. It's really quite simple. Our choices, like math, can be really simple.
Yeah.
I need to add on this. I need to subtract this. I need to put it in this section of time, or I'm going to do this in this. And so I just think, I don't know, it just feels very freeing to think about. I want to keep it simple.
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Oh man. I mean, you just took the wind right out of my lungs there. That was wonderful. I really think that this is probably even just thinking about this stuff beforehand. This conversation is still incredibly encouraging, just hearing your thoughts. And I love the candidness of these conversations where you're teaching me as much as we're trying to just kind of inspire other people to think this way too. So I really hope that we can, you and I, even just set an example to just try to take the things that are complex and break them down into those simple, achievable tasks and maybe just make some of those practical choices, even starting this week and even today to just simplify things.
Well, Russell said it. So if you're listening here to our podcast, if you're viewing from home or from your office, or maybe listening in the car drive on your commute, would you consider those areas of your life that you have made too complicated, too complex, and just decide in a very tangible way to keep it simple? For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.